Alright, so it's here. Let's talk about the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The landmark season of the World Endurance Championship. It's a bit different to the other rounds of the World Endurance Championship. It's something that you follow. I've been following it loosely over the course of the season. But, well, it's Le Mans. It is its own unique beast. And in this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about it just before free practice gets underway. Free practice 1 starts on Wednesday. Then so does 2. There's also qualifying practice. Then Thursday you have 3 and 4 with the Hyperpole in there. Then we have Saturday and Sunday, the days of the race. The Circuit de la Sarthe in the Pays de la Loire region, or the capital of the state of Maine along the Sarthe River, is going to be the host to this weekend's action. And, well, it could be wet outside the river as well. We're expected to see some rain over the course of Friday, though there's not any racing action in terms of the World Endurance Championship at that time. But on the Saturday, we could expect some rain on the build-up to the 24-hour race. And then over the course of Sunday as well, according to the estimates I'm seeing, there's a high chance of rain through the night and potentially through Sunday proper, which could cause some kinds of drama. I know last year things like fog and mist were issues. I mean, we saw the Nürburgring 24 being shortened to essentially, 7 or 8 hours of racing because of the fog. That's something that can still happen as late as June. But let's talk a little bit about the entries, and then we'll talk a little bit about BOP, or balance of performance. Let's start off with the headline class, the Hypercars. Number 2 and 3, Cadillac Racing entries. And in those we see El Bamba, Alex Lynn and Alex Palou. And then Sebastian Bourdais, Renger van der Zande and Scott Dixon. The number 3 entry, I believe, is not a full-time WEC entry. And neither is the number 4, the first Porsche Penske Motorsport of Mathieu Jaminet, Felipe Nasser and Nick Tandy, who I've once raced against in iRacing. He's a former Le Mans winner. Supposedly not as great behind the wheel of TCRs on the platform, though blame the Red Bull livery for that one. The number 5 Penske has Matt Campbell, Michael Christensen and Frederick Makovecki behind the wheel. Then the number 6 has Kevin Estre, Andre Lotterer and Lawrence Van Thor. Then we get into the 2 Toyotas, the 7 and the 8. Jose Maria Lopez is being called up into that one, alongside Kamui Kobayashi and Nick De Vries. And then the number 8 is Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley and Ryo Hirakawa. Then we have the 11, one of the first new cars for 2024, the Isotta Francini, which has Carl Watana Bennett behind the wheel, as well as Jean-Carl Vernet and Antonio Zeraval. After that we have the first of the Jotas, the number 12 with Will Stevens, Norman Nato and Callum Ilott. Then we have our first BMW, the 15 Dreamsland 4, Raffaele Marciello and Marco Wittmann. Then the first of the Iron Lynx is, of course, BMW, new for 2024 in WEC Iron Lynx. And the Lamborghini is new to the Hypercar for 2024. That one is Romain Grosjean, Andrea Caldarelli and Matteo Carioli. Then we have the second BMW of Sheldon van der Linde, Robin Freins and Rene Rast. Before we get into the 2 Alpines of Paul Chapetan, Ferdinand Habsburg Lofringen and Charles Malesi. And then the second one, which features Nicolas Lapierre, Mick Schumacher and Mathieu Vassier. Then we have the second Jota car, Rasmussen, Hansen and Button. Before we have the 2 AF courses, Fuoco, Molina and Nicholson, then Pierre Guidi, Collado and Giovinazzi. After that we have the Iron Lynx of Bertolotti, Kvyat and Mortara. The third AF course entry, the 83, which has Robert Kubica, Robert Schwartzman and Yefei. Before we get into the 2 Peugeots now featuring a rear wing for this season, which are the ones of Jean-Marc Verne, Mikkel Jensen and Nico Muller, then Stoffel Van Dorn, Paul de Rest and Loic Duval. We have the Proton competition, Porsche 963 of Neil Jarni, Harry Tinknell and Julian Andler. And then the last one is a 311 Wayland Cadillac, which is an invitational from the States of Luis Felipe Durrani, Jack Aitken and Felipe Drugovich. Following on from that, we have the LMP2s. The LMP2 category did not return for WEC this season because of the demand in hypercars. You can clearly see the big uptick year on year, and year on year on year, in fact, with no Glickenhauses, but still with such a strong hypercar field. But we have a handful of different LMP2 racing from Proton Competition, Vector Sport, AO. United Autosports have got 2 entries. Nielsen have got entries in there. Algarve, IDEC, Duquesne, DKR, Inter Europol, Cool Racing, CrowdStrike Racing by APR, another Cool Racing entry, Parnas Racing, and then we have the AF Corsa. Some of the drivers that stand out in that, the likes of Oliver Jarvis, Ben Keating, Felipe Albuquerque, Louis Delatraz, Nolan Siegel, who we've seen at IndyCar a couple of times over the course of this season, Nicky Kathberg, Frederick Vesti, Job van Uitert, Ollie Caldwell, and Ben Bardercoat. And then we get into LMGT3, the GT3 class, new to Le Mans for this year, and we have a wealth of different entries here as well. For people who are just joining in with WEC now, we have the Ford Mustang present this season, and the Corvette Z06 LMGT3R, which is somewhat based on the previous GTE, which you might have seen if you were following the Le Mans 24 Hours last season. And again, we have all kinds of different names in these different entries. We have Aston Martins, we have BMWs, Fords, Ferraris, McLarens, Lamborghinis, Lexuses, and Corvettes. As well as, well, unsurprisingly, Porsches. Perhaps the biggest change in terms of the LMGT3 lineup is that Dorian Pan is not going to be starting due to injury, so Rahal Frey takes over the entry there in the Iron Dames as the 3rd registered driver. But again, if you're somebody who is quite aware of LMGT3 racing or GT3 racing or Tin Top racing, some of these names will be familiar. Perhaps the biggest standout one in the 46 is going to be Valentino Rossi, especially if you've followed the past few years. He's going to be joined by Ahmed Al-Arthi and Maxime Martin, as we have seen throughout the season. But other names that you might recognise in the other parts of motorsport are people like Augusto Farfus, Sean Galal, Kelvin van der Linde, Marco Sorensen, Jordan Taylor, Marino Sato, Larry Ten Voord, and Danny Uncadella. And before I leave you, I'm going to give you the BOP, or the balance of performance, for this weekend. Balanced performance is something that means that teams aren't going to be constantly in a development war to make their cars better and better, because in theory they should catch up to the rest of the field, because there can be kinds of elements that change that can benefit them or harm other cars. Now, traditionally these are things like weight or power, but at the same time, because of the fact that we have hybrid units, energy can also be a big factor. Changes from the last round of Spa to Le Mans have actually harmed BMW, who are one of the cars that did gain weight alongside the Cadillac, the Lamborghini, and the Porsche. The other cars all lost weight to varying degrees. The main beneficiaries being Peugeot, who lose nearly 20 kilograms from the minimum car weight, Toyota, who lose 11 kilograms, Isuzu Fraschini, who lose 12 kilograms, Ferrari, who lose 10, and then Alpine lose 7 kilograms to minimum car weight. And that can make a big difference, because it can affect the handling of the car, can affect tyre wear, and over the course of an endurance race, these different factors can add up. They can also be further bolstered by the maximum car power, which at Le Mans has 2 different bands. One of them is to do with the band below 250 kilometers per hour or 155 miles per hour in old money. And then the other is the stuff over that. 250 kilometers per hour is quite standard if you look at Europe, because, well, for example, the Autobahn, whilst it doesn't have a limit, in theory, a lot of German cars are limited by a digital limiter to 155. And what you can see is below the 250 threshold, typically the cars have got a lower power output, but in some cases it stays the same. Cadillac have got the same output either side, and in the case of the likes of Ferrari, Lamborghini and Peugeot, their power output is actually greater below 250 than above 250. The cars that have a noticeable increase above 250 are BMW, whose value is higher than it was at Spa. The likes of Porsche, who have a flat increase overall, and then Toyota, whose overall values are still lower than at Spa, but it's noticeable the increase in power between the two bands. Alpine tells a very similar story. And that can have an impact over the course of the race as well, because if you think about it, Ferrari were quite good down the straights last year. Cadillac are going to need a bit more of a benefit in terms of the power. And one of the things that's quite surprising is Sotto Fascini, although it has the most power out of the grid, it doesn't necessarily have it in all bands. So it shows that its particular strengths and particular weaknesses are quite clear. The same for example, Lamborghini, who are the highest in terms of power output, below the speed of 250 kilometers per hour. The other metric that gets affected is stint energy. And I believe what that means is the amount of energy that can be produced over the course of a stint. The team that has been harmed the most from this, again, is Ferrari, who won last time at Le Mans. But then Alpine have suffered as well. Peugeot has suffered almost as much as Ferrari have, and Toyota have suffered a bit as well. Overall, most of the teams have seen a decrease in terms of the energy output from Spa. The only ones that haven't are Porsche. And before anybody jumps to conclusions and goes, oh, that means that Porsche are going to dominate, there will be a lot of data they'll be feeding off of to make these decisions. Some of it may be from the last round in Spa and how the bob worked there. Some of it, for these cars that ran last year at Le Mans, will be based on the data that they have from last year at Le Mans. And some kind of inferences that will also weigh in the other rounds. If you want to have a look at this data and the entry list and anything else like that, you can check it out in the description down below, as well as a link to the schedule for the weekend. But that'll do it for this video, and I don't expect the review that will be out on Sunday to be anywhere near as long as this, but thank you so much for sticking through with this. It's a lot of fun to be able to talk about stuff like the Mon. It means I get to go into the nitty-gritty and all of these nerdy little details about things like BOP, and also talk about these stars in the entry list and people to watch out for. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you around soon. Bye for now.